#SAfm Talking Point.
All right, thanks for that, Liesl Wilson. Our Municipal Watch feature today, we're taking a look at the state of metropolitan councils. Oh gosh, I don't know why I said universities there. And it's through the latest report by the South African Cities Network. So, Sithole, you're still trying to explain, what I was asking about in terms of climate change and the consequences of that, where municipalities and metros have not been efficient in, instilling their own rules, such as where people can build houses.
Sure. So, and I was saying that if we were to follow that particular example, and let's just spend a minute on it, what happens is that people move from places of poverty. They come into the city searching for work and a better life. They are unable to be sheltered, at least not with ease and with the speed with which they expect. They then look for places to locate. The first thing, those places will, in most probability, be near places of work. So the shorter the distance it is to where I can get an opportunity, I will locate. That's the first challenge. Now, whose land are you locating on? Is it publicly owned? Is it privately owned? Can it be packaged by the public authorities so that a new human settlement can be created for the new migrants into the city? When that doesn't happen, then the new migrants will settle anyway and put an informal settlement. So sometimes it's unfair for us, especially those people that can afford, to be shocked every time there's a new shack. I think we need to understand that phenomena for what it is. It is poor people trying to eke out a living. Now, sometimes they locate in places that are flood areas for reasons of the fact that that land is cheap, or no one is going to fight for it. And when there is a flood, like the ones that we've seen in KZN, then they get to be flooded. Now, all of those things imply that the law enforcement lever of the municipality is able to do that. It's not coping at all. The rate of urbanization is at a pace that has been unimaginable. It has happened, again, as you said, these are not just South African challenges. I mean, it has happened in Asia. It's happening fast in the African continent, and South Africa is not immune from that. And our studies show that the population profile is becoming younger and younger and younger. And all of these people, if you looked at the latest statistics of unemployment, the people that are unemployed are the young people. And therefore, they are the ones that will be looking for these places of stay that are affordable to them, and they will do anything else. Because after all, they are anthropological beings, first and foremost. Right? They are not going to sit on the side and say, we are waiting for government. They're going to make life happen with as little means that they have at their disposal. So it's a systemic issue. It's not just one issue. It's not just the naughtiness or the misbehavior of poor people. It's poor people trying to make a living for themselves. And all they're asking for is to be supported. And which means that our institutions, our public institutions, including and especially local government, has to be ready for all of these things. And it is at that stage that we say there are certain issues or functions that really must start to befall local government. And human settlement, we are arguing, is one of those functions that perhaps we need to start devolving fully, particularly to those municipalities that are proven to have capability. And I think we know that metropolitan municipalities have capability to deliver human settlements rather than just houses. And I'm using this to say it is something else to be given a function that is a standalone function, such as human settlements, when in fact all we are looking for is a toolbox that has all the requisite ingredients that will then lead you to being able to deliver a human settlement for poor people that cannot afford expensive settlements. And that's the phenomena that we need to understand for what it is.
All right. Let me go to Nombulelo in Kimberley. Good morning, Nombulelo.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks for taking my call. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
I believe that the main solution to all of this would be to prioritize rural development and hence halt the coming of the people, the influx of people from the rural areas. Because the urban areas will never be able to cope with large numbers of people who are semi-skilled or unskilled and all of them competing for limited employment. They cannot find employment. They cannot pay for municipal services. The municipality stays bankrupt because of a lack of resources or finances. So rather prioritize rural development like farms, like the Isdina farm project. Unfortunately, it was hijacked and it was politicized and it was corrupted. But prioritize rural development so that the rural people stay in the rural areas.
And and what about the fact that, again, there is an appeal of the city. So some people will look at coming to the city as also being part of a modern world, and they want to be part of that world.
They will see the lack of employment and then compare it with the development taking place in the rural areas, and then see that it would be better to go back, especially the older people, middle-aged people. The young ones will definitely not want to stay in the rural areas because they think of the limelight and the bright lights of the city. But those who will have experienced poverty and a lack of jobs in the city will see that, okay, there is development taking place. There is land being made available. There are tractors being given to us to allow us, to enable us to grow and to sell our produce, to form cooperatives and become productive and have a meaningful life. They will then go back to the rural areas. The ones who have more sense will see that, wow, it may even be better to go back to the rural areas and maybe electrify. If government can also give electricity and sanitation to some of those rural farms and cooperatives, it would be more attractive for people who have sense. They will then go back to the rural areas.
Sithole, what do you make of that suggestion? Is it the answer?
No, so it is partially an answer. So let me indicate where I agree with Nombulelo. Our rural development, I think, is falling short in many ways than one. We don't have enough time to go into it. Safe to say, unfortunately, over the period, our rural development has been equated to agrarian reform, which is not the same. So whereas there's been emphasis on agrarian reform, it has not led to sustainable rural development. And I think that's where I agree with Nombulelo. And I think by rural development, it's about identifying what are the competitive advantages of different rural areas in such a manner that they're able to contribute to the GDP, to economic development, the type of economic development that retains people in that particular space, which will then enable other parts of government to ensure that there is a social infrastructure such as schools, clinics, and all of that caters for the population that would have been made to stay as a consequence of rural development that is driven by agrarian reform. Unfortunately, there's been lots of gaps between that agrarian reform process on the one hand and rural development, and those gaps they can be closed. Secondly, I agree with Nombulelo that it's not rural versus urban. It's rural and urban. Because if you want to have strong cities, you need strong rural areas. And the converse is true. If you want to have strong rural areas, you need to have strong urban areas, because rural areas tend to feed urban areas with resources, whether those resources are human capital or food or whatever the case might be. But if you have a very weak urban form, then that urban form is not going to be able to absorb what comes out of the rural. This has been articulated in a policy document that South Africa's cabinet adopted, if I'm not mistaken, around about 2015, called the Integrated Urban Development Framework, which is very clear about how it is that we should be driving urbanization for purposes of benefiting the rural areas. So I think the issue here is partially the lack of implementation or insufficient capability to have the type of implementation that achieves all these noble objectives that are stipulated in the IUDF.
You know, as you're speaking, Sithole, you're reminding me of, and I don't know if it's the same policy you're referencing. I just can't remember the exact name of the project. But part of what government wanted to do, and it does go back to about 2015, round about there, is develop new cities in rural areas, and some of it was linked to the economic development in those areas. So if you had, Medupi in Limpopo being built, then you would have a city that's kind of built around that economic development, because that's a power station that's supposed to be there for you. It has a particular lifetime, and you have people, engineers and all sorts of other people that have to come and work there. And how do you feed and drive an ecosystem there? I'm not sure what ever happened to it, though.
I think it's perhaps entangled in the National Development Plan. But there were suggestions that came out of the National Development Plan, in which it was encouraging the development of new cities as a consequence of economic anchors such as the one that we are making reference to in this instance, Medupi. And I think we have made slow progress in that particular regard. The other point that I would have wanted to make in relation to Nombulelo's point is that we mustn't forget that we live in a democracy now, so there's a lot of freedom that we have to move. Right, so it's been a very difficult thing to arrest, for lack of a better word, young people in what they see as rural areas. They're all looking at going into the urban areas. They are attracted by universities that you find in urban areas that you do not find in rural areas, just by way of example. They are attracted by the possibility of a connectivity through internet and all those things that are easier to have or access in urban areas than you would in rural areas. So that's why I was saying it's not a one-sided issue. It's both rural and urban, and that, in part, is the solution to some of the challenges that we have.
Okay. Let me go to Madwaga in East London. Dr. Madwaga, good evening. Good morning, rather.
KV, good morning, ma'am.
Yes.
I think what Uta Sithole has reported in essence is saying that government has failed. That's one. The essence of the report is unavoidably an admission. Two, I think from a wide spectrum, even if you approach it from whichever angle, government has really failed. One of our problems in particular is related to comparing how the different cities fare in terms of bringing forth decent living for residents. Is that we tend to compare, or government tends to compare the West against the West. Even when we compare ourselves against international countries across the globe, we compare ourselves against the West. One example, if you take the city of Cape Town, in my books, the city of Cape Town is doing well in comparison to Mangaung. However, the city of Cape Town is not doing good for the residents of Cape Town. You know, that's one issue that must not miss us. The last point as I land is that I have a sense that as we discuss these documents and plans, some of us, we tend to be showing signs of lack of agency, lack of sympathy for the masses that are currently facing hardships. In the morning, Nugaitopi was talking about the ANC, Nugaitopi talking about Vision 2030. You can imagine what that means for a guy that does not have food to eat as in now. Now, I think really we've got a problem. And it's a problem, solution resting among all of us. The problem with us, the community members, is that when we participate in the state, we get shot at, we get victimized. Look at what is happening in Portland. Look at what is happening in Kwabatalibas and Jondo. The workers, organized labor, has been offering support to this government, whether through COSATU or through independent unions. But the workers' voice is not listened to. There's been proposals by workers, and workers are not listened to. The only solution that we have is not to try and make this broken system work, is to literally workers, organized workers through COSATU must just abandon the ANC, because insofar as bringing forth decent living to the lives of workers and communities, both in rural cities as well as in towns, the government has been pathetic, Mama.
All right.
Been failing all of us.
All right, Ntate Madwaga, let's leave it there. Thanks for your contribution there. In Pretoria, Fumani. Good morning, Fumani.
Thank you for the opportunity. Morning.
Morning.
I agree
Morning.
with most of your presenters. I'm rushing for time. I agree with all the technical inputs, but this is what I'm going to say. Governing together. It reminds me when I worked in local government, when this organization had just started. I was against it for the reason that for a developing country with a population, majority population, which was totally excluded from governance, we are creating yet another governing institution. Another time, there were people who wanted to change to the new, and there were people who came from the old order. And I won't go deep into what the other reason, because it tended to stifle the growth of the civil service, particularly local government civil service. If you take SEZ that grew up in China and are exploding all over the continent, our continent, they rely on a strong civil service. Now, I think, whilst I agree with the technical, I'm still, now that it seems to be a reality, the cities network, but governance means the people. So entities and cities networks, how do they work with the municipality so that it governs? The municipality must govern in a representative way, because it's about service, while the national government governs in a framework to link up the whole country. But local government is about people. All government is about people. So how are entities relating to people? And I'll end it there.
Okay.
Challenge. I'll give myself homework. I'm saying, unfortunately, it's creating governance where the people don't even know what a councillor is and the function of the councillor. That's a topic
And the thing
day.
is, Fumani, these are such complex processes to understand. And I think it almost becomes, it serves a purpose that the majority of people don't know how these structures work, because then people can get away with not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Thank you very much. I'm done.
All right. I think, all right, Fumani, we'll leave it there. Let me take a quick break. I'll take Colin after this, and then we'll also go back to Sithole.
A message from Randwater. Randwater has a long-term commitment to the communities that we serve, to distribute our high-quality potable water to our customers in Gauteng, Mpumalanga, the Free State, and the Northwest provinces. We use large diameter pipelines. Both the volume of water and the pressure in the pipeline is extremely high. We want everybody to know that it is very dangerous for people to encroach near or over our pipeline servitudes. A burst pipeline can be fatal. To know if you're placing yourself or your family at risk by residing near or over our pipelines, please look out for the Randwater beacons. The Randwater beacons are rectangular and are made of solid concrete. They are painted either blue or white. They serve as a warning of the danger that exists below the ground. Randwater, finding new ways.
The Talking Point with Kathy Motlasana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We're taking a look at the state of our cities. Sithole Mbanga is the CEO of the South African Cities Network. He's joining us for this conversation. I'm still taking your calls on 011-714-2006. Colin, let me come to you.
Good morning, Kathy.
Hi.
And good morning to your guest. I agree with that lady at phone just now about urbanization and rural areas. Municipalities must also take blame. If they're not building infrastructure and they're not giving the little bit of business that is there in that areas, not giving them service. It's like Clover pulling out from a Free State wherever they were because they weren't getting service. The roads weren't looked after. Nothing was looked after. No water, no electricity, things like that. So municipalities must also pull their weight and start looking around and keep people where they can keep people and create work for those people. Because the cities, in time to come, you take another 10, 20 years, the cities will have no more space for people like that. Now you take the Eastern Cape. I believe it's almost empty. Everybody's flocking all over the country because the Eastern Cape is so run down. There's nothing going on. And that land is lying dormant. Farming can take place. Educate and help the people, buy implements, tractors and things like that. And then they'll be able to. I get a lot of people coming, ringing my doorbell. I ask them, where do you come from? Eastern Cape. And they're not youngsters. They are quite elderly, in their 40s, 50s, sometimes even older. Now they came all the way from the Eastern Cape to Cape Town to look for a job. There's not even enough jobs for the people in the area here, in the urban areas. You know what I mean? Even the urban area people are without jobs. So the influx will continue if government and the municipalities don't pull their weight and get together and build infrastructure, build factories, even if it's a beginning, you at least keep the people and schools, look after everything. So municipalities have got a lot of blame to take. Thanks very much, Kathy.
And I think in many respects, Colin, you can't blame people for looking
yes,
and
correct, you can't.
Opportunities.
Because the municipalities actually also chasing them because the municipality is doing nothing. The roads are bad, no water, nothing, no lights, nothing.
All right, Colin,
thank you, Kathy.
Let's leave it there for this morning. Sithole, let me come back to you.
No, thanks very much, Kathy. Again, I don't think we undertake, and perhaps this is a direct response to the last caller, Colin, and that is to say, the purpose of us undertaking the work that we do is to understand how these phenomena are born, how they evolve, how they impact the sustainability or not of these institutions called municipalities and all of that. Our responsibility is not to exonerate municipalities from their incapability. And I can tell you, we can write another report about the incapabilities that are faced by municipalities or that municipalities generally have. So we can write that particular report. But my take is that writing that report, we have to do it in such a manner that we are not beating the municipality almost to death as I indicated earlier, there aren't green shoots of individuals and initiatives that are there. For instance, there are municipalities in the same province that you made reference to that have individuals that are trying to make ends meet under very difficult circumstances, and they do achieve something, however little it might be from time to time. So this is not about saying that municipalities must not take responsibility. I agree fully with yourself, and of course the point that was made by Nombulelo earlier, that some level of responsibility has to go to the decision-making or lack of on the part of those that are leading these municipalities in South Africa all round, and not just in one particular province. Funani makes the point around the need for a good civil service. The work that we have done has in part influenced organizations, amongst others, such as the Local Government Association, who are doing a very good work in terms of trying to professionalize the civil servant in the local government space. And I think perhaps one of the days it might be incumbent on you to engage with them and understand what it is exactly that they are doing to make sure that civil service becomes professionalized. Remember that when the new local government system was put in place, there are certain functions that were not necessarily professionalized. For instance, is a municipal manager a professional job, or is it a political appointment? And even if it is a political appointment, does it not have to be professionalized? And I think our colleagues at the Local Government Association are better placed to answer, because they are currently seized with the work of ensuring that the local government employee or the local government soldier is professionalized, is protected beyond just being unionized. And I think they are better placed to speak to that particular point. But otherwise, I think I agree with the sentiments that have been shared by your callers, Kathy. Thanks.
I've got a message here. It's unsigned, and this listener is saying, Kathy, it's quite interesting of us to be speaking of people moving from rural areas. Whom of us are not coming from rural areas to be using terms such as they, them? Are we now owners of these urban areas or factors of production? Do we have entitlement just because we came to these cities before them? I think we should rather be exacting on government and private sector so that whoever comes from anywhere is able to access resources and a better life wherever they are. There is no us and them. And I think it's an important point to make, right? And that's why what you said about the fact that we live in a free country. People are free to pursue whatever opportunities that they feel are available to them. And the reality is that you have some industries and sectors that are so centralized to urban areas that, even if one were to improve service delivery in rural areas, it doesn't mean those people will stay there because perhaps what they want to do is simply not available.
Yes, and I must just on that point agree with that unsigned sentiment. I am one of those people. I'm a migrant from the Eastern Cape in the Transkei at it. So I come with experience of what it is to live in a rural area. And what the Constitution has done is to protect me to be able to navigate the country. And I'm only just one type of a migrant, a South African migrant from a rural area. There are also other migrants that are non-South Africans. And we are all making a contribution. I think the good thing is that we've got, in the olden days, the civil society organizations had a slogan that talks about one city, one tax base. In other words, recognizing the fact that when you are in a city, you contribute to the growth of that particular city, irrespective of where you come from, ultimately. And I think currently we have a very progressive tax system that says even the poorest person in a city contributes in one way or the other to the income of the city and finally to the income of the country. And that is the value-added tax. If you buy bread, 14% of what you have purchased contributes to the national revenue of the country. And therefore, you have the right to be there in the same way that you have a responsibility to behave in such a manner that you cooperate with others.
Sithole Mbanga, let me thank you for your time and for contributing to this conversation. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the South African Cities Network. So much that I think we've been able to gather about the state of our cities and just the role that all of us can be playing. Because, like you heard, it's not going to be resolved by just government alone. We need everybody to get involved.